Hello and welcome to One-on-One on Plus TV Africa. Here with me in the studio is Mr. Muda Yusuf, the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to speak with me on various topics regarding the Nigerian economy, especially our dependence on oil when it comes to imports and exports in the country. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Based on statistics by the Debt Management Office, we see that we have more foreign debt portfolio than the domestic debt portfolio. I was speaking with an analyst earlier in the month, and then he said to me that it's better for us to have more foreign debt portfolio than domestic debt portfolio because of the interest rates. But doesn't that bother you somewhat?
Well, it's something to worry about, but there are arguments on both sides.
Let's hear it.
You know, the federal government recently, because of the burden of debt service, because if you look at the 2019 budget, the debt service component is over 2 trillion naira.
Yes.
And it has been like that for the past few years. So as a result of the burden of debt service, it was decided that it is better to rebalance the debt portfolio so that we have less of domestic debt and more foreign debt, because the component of debt service is almost 70% domestic. And the reason for that is the cost at which we borrow them domestically. Treasury bills, which is one of the main instruments of borrowing by government, sometimes could be as high as 15%, could be as high as even 16%. The same thing with federal government bonds. So the cost at which the government is borrowing domestically is too high. So that is what is affecting the volume or the amount of debt service, you know, which is putting a lot of burden on government budgets. So that is what informed the decision to rebalance the portfolio in favor of foreign debt. And we have seen that we have even been going for some Euro bond and all of that.
Yes.
The whole idea is to use that to rebalance the portfolio. But we haven't made much progress. So the advantage that that may have is that if we are lucky that we don't have a depreciation in the currency, then it will be easier, because the most of the foreign debt instruments or foreign debt thing that will incur, borrowings, the interest rate is much lower. Sometimes it can just be about 4%, 5% maximum. But domestic borrowing is multiples of that.
However,
about
the
15,
risk on
16,
foreign debt is a lot higher than domestic debt.
Well, not necessarily. It depends on how we're able to manage the macroeconomic environment. You know, you will notice that in the past few years, maybe 2-3 years, we are seeing some fairly stable exchange rates.
Stability in our exchange rates, yes.
So if you're able to maintain through the macroeconomic stability, and if you're also lucky that we don't have any major issue in the external sector, particularly that will affect commodity prices, then it will be a good decision. It will be a good judgment, you know, to go with that. But I agree with you, there's also a risk, you know, because if there is a sudden depreciation, you will need double of what you are using to service now to be able to pay to service the foreign debt.
Yes.
That is the risk that it is. But, you know, for the federal government, you know, we also have a lot of earnings that come directly to the federal purse.
Yes, we have the tax, of course.
Tax, apart from the Naira component, I'm even talking of the foreign inflows. You know, the government earns dollars, you know. So if it comes to servicing the debt in dollars, it is perhaps much easier at the federal level.
Well, but it's not the same in our, you know, foreign.
But it's not the same thing at the state level. The state government don't have direct access to foreign exchange as the federal government has.
Yes.
So if the state government incurs any foreign debt, for you to service that, for the state government to service that debt, you have to generate the Naira revenue and convert to dollars or to foreign before you can service the debt. So the state governments are at a much bigger risk of a more complicated debt situation in terms of servicing foreign debt. I mean, for instance, if a state government has taken a loan maybe at the time when exchange rate was 150 Naira to the dollar.
Yes.
which has happened to some states. They have incurred some. Today, exchange rate is about
360. That's what? Over double
That is double.
price. Yes.
So that's a lot of burden to be able to service that debt. Another 2, 3, 4 years, the exchange rate may also further depreciate. So if that backlog of foreign debt remains, then that may be a very big issue for a state government, for instance.
What happens now if, peradventure, oil prices drop?
That is the risk. So there are risks on both sides. On the side of having more domestic debt, the major challenge is the cost of servicing the debt. I mean, the interest rate.
Okay.
Interest rates on treasury bills, interest rates on bonds. But in terms of domestic debt, the variability or the volatility is not that much. Because interest rate, if you look at it over the last 10 years, has been somewhere around that. But in terms of foreign borrowing, the volatility risk is higher. Just as we just gave an example now.
Yes, yes.
And there are some governments that have contracted some foreign loans based on the fact that you had an exchange rate of even 100, 150.
But in all of these...
But they have to now service those debt liabilities at the current exchange rate.
But are we usually giving, I don't know if you have this information, Joe, but are we usually giving an opportunity to have like forward contracts, for example, such that at the time of our borrowings, we know that in the future, just in case the value of the dollar to the naira increases, we know that this is the deal that we made. When I'm paying back, I'm either paying back at, say, 270 naira per dollar instead of whatever the current rate is now. Well,
I'm not sure that any foreign creditor will accept that kind of terms. I'm not sure they will accept that kind of terms. Because if you have borrowed money in dollars,
okay,
you have to repay back in dollars. It's simple. So the story of whether there's depreciation or not is not the business of your creditor. Because the creditor is not going to spend naira in his own country. And the creditors are also in business anyway. They are lending so that they can also make some money. So if you have issues with your own currency, you cannot transfer the burden of that to your creditor. So it is for those who are borrowing, either at the federal level or at the state level, to assess properly the risk of borrowing. And to actually weigh the options as to whether it is better to go for foreign or for domestic. But on both sides, there are very serious risks. Because I know some state governments now are struggling to come out
of their debts,
of the debt situation, because they have borrowed heavily in foreign currency. And over time, the exchange rate has been depreciating. So it has been exerting a lot of pressure on their domestic revenue. You know. So there are issues on both sides. There are issues.
Oh, rather unfortunate.
Yeah.
All right, so let's also take a quick look at the fact that some global analysts will say to you, and we see this playing in countries like Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, that countries that have excessive natural resources suffer from what they would refer to as a natural resource curse. I don't know if we would term Nigeria as one of them, because with all of the revenue generated from oil, for example, we are not seeing it translating to a better standard of living for our people when it comes to GDP per capita. So what do you have to say about this, really?
Well, it depends on the quality of governance. Because if you have, we have seen countries that have natural resources, and they have used the natural resources to diversify their economy. Take the UAE, for instance. It's an oil-producing country. But today, what they earn from non-oil export revenue is much more than what they earn from oil. You can see the kind of investment, the flow of investors, tourism, trade, and it's a major hub for business, even for exports. They are fantastic.
It's a tax-free economy.
Tax-free, a lot of investments are going there. So they have moved away from being heavily dependent on oil to dependent on even non-oil sources of revenue. So it depends on how you expend the resources. If you use the resources you get from natural resources, the revenue, you get from there to build the capacity of the economy, particularly the non-oil aspect of the economy.
Yes.
You can put the economy on a very sound footing, so that if there is any major challenge with oil, the shock on the system will not be that much.
Felt. Yes, yes, yes.
But unfortunately, Nigeria falls into the category that you mentioned, unfortunately. Because we have been, over years, been very complacent, and all eyes are on the oil revenue. Even as we speak. Because we have been talking about the economic diversification, if you still look at our foreign exchange earnings,
yes,
and look at the percentage of oil revenue,
yes,
it's still high, it's over 80%. And even our normal revenue, it's over 50% that is coming from oil. So we haven't moved away, from the oil dependence over so many years, and that is unfortunate. And the reason is that we have not invested to create the environment for the non-oil export economy
to also grow.
To thrive, to grow. We have the resources, we have the human resources.
Capital,
we have the entrepreneurs, because it's entrepreneurs that make things happen. But when you don't create the environment for them to be able to create the wealth, to diversify the economy, then we have a very big issue. And that is why you see that there is a whole lot of issues around productivity in the non-oil part of the economy. If you take agriculture, for instance,
yes,
serious productivity problems. Because the bulk of the operators in that sector today are still the peasant farmers. The agricultural output we have in Nigeria is almost 80% from the peasant farmers. We don't have much of commercial agriculture. If you take manufacturing is also grappling with a lot of productivity problems.
We have infrastructural deficits, which is
infrastructure,
a major challenge.
Power, sometimes even funding, then logistics, the port situation, all these things impact on productivity. And if you also look at even the service sector, there's also a whole lot of need for infrastructure to support the service sector. Because no matter the kind of service sector environment you create, you need ICT support. You need to leverage on technology. You need power to, power your systems 24/7. At what cost is that coming? Then you also have policy issues, which sometimes can just throw spanners in the works.
Yes, yes, yes.
So that you cannot plan over a long time.
And this could affect investors' confidence.
Of course it is. You put an investment in place today. It could be a manufacturing investment. You have put the investment, maybe you have borrowed funds close to 100 million or so, based on the variables that was prevailing at that moment.
Time. Yes.
Suddenly, you can just have a change of policy. Now, I have the instance of one investor who is investing in tomato processing.
Okay.
Tomato paste, yes.
Okay, okay.
Now, the man is in Ogun State, invested heavily, close to 100 million. And the model of the business was that you import the paste, the tomato paste.
Okay.
You bring it to your factory in bulk, and you do the packaging here in Nigeria, and sell.
Okay.
But suddenly, soon after the man finished setting up the factory, first, the import duty on tomato paste went up from about 10% to 50%.
Wow.
That was a major dislocation for the company. Soon after, the CBN came up with all these 41 items and excluded even tomato paste from products that can have access to the foreign exchange market. What is the man going to do with the investment? Of course, the argument may be sound that, okay, go and get local tomatoes. But do we have the capacity at this moment to feed the plants? Do we have the kind of tomato that those plants have been designed to use?
Yes.
These are issues. But sometimes when people take decisions at the policy level, we don't look at the costs to the investor that are existing.
Yes.
You just look at it at a very simplistic level. We have so many tomatoes. Tomatoes are rotting away in mile 12. Go and buy tomato and go and use it in your factory. It doesn't work that way. So through such policies, you create a lot of problems for those who want to help to diversify the economy.
Yes.
So when other investors see that kind of experience, you rather just take your money, go and buy treasury bills,
and be sure that you can sleep well.
You sleep well, your income is guaranteed, there is no tax on it, there is no risk on it. Well, just go and buy treasury bills. But if you do that, what just will you create? Nothing. If you do that, how will you?
Conversation, but we need to take a break now.
Okay.
We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll continue this conversation and how the chamber is helping out to push regulations that would ease business flow in Nigeria. Stay with us. Regarding the chamber now, how can the chamber help to instigate the much needed regulations that would help these businesses thrive?
Well, the major instrument that we have in the chamber is the instrument of engagement with the policymakers. Because what will make the difference in this economy is the quality of our policies. It is the quality of our institutions. And it's also, to some extent, the social environment. Because that is increasingly becoming a major factor now when you look at issues of security and unemployment. It's becoming a big social problem affecting the economy. So when we look at the policy space, we continue to engage on the right kind of policies to support diversification. Because this whole story is about how to diversify this economy and make the economy much more sustainable. An economy from which our foreign earnings is 80% dependent on oil is not a sustainable economy. An economy where over 50% of our revenue is coming from oil is not sustainable.
Yes.
Because there are all sorts of factors that can just upturn
the market.
The market. And we find ourselves in a very jittery situation because we cannot stand the shocks of
the buffer that is needed. We don't have it.
Even our foreign exchange reserve that we often celebrate, until we see the breakdown of the components of the reserves, it's difficult to celebrate because there is a foreign portfolio component of the reserves, there is a borrowing component of the reserves. By the time you take all these things away, what you have in the reserve may not be as robust as what we think we have. And how much shock can that absorb or stand? If suddenly there is a shock, for instance, in the...
So there's no hedge pretty much to avoid...
Nothing much. I mean, you can see what is going around in the global economy now. The trade war is going to create all sorts of dislocations.
I suppose it's already creating...
And when it happens, one of the casualties will be commodity prices. Because when global economy begins to slow down, the demand for oil will also slow. And when demand drops, the price will drop. So coming back to the issue of engagement and what the chamber is doing, it's about how to engage at the policy level.
Okay.
We engage at the monetary policy level. What can we bring to the table to stabilize the economy and to encourage investment? Because the economic growth and prosperity is about investment. It's about domestic investment. It's about foreign investment. It's about large enterprises investing. It's about small businesses also investing. So it's about how to bring the policy environment to support investment at different levels. So we look at our monetary policy. How is our interest rate supporting investment? How is our foreign exchange policy supporting investment? I just gave you an example of somebody that set up a tomato processing plant. There was no notice. There was no time to even transition from one model of business to another. Suddenly, you just have a policy that because you want to encourage the use of local tomato, we are banning the import of tomato paste.
And use of local tomato when the infrastructure that is necessary to help, expand the market.
Expand the market, process it, transport it, look at the quality issues. All those things are not there. So we also need to be fair to those who have invested money, especially in the real sector of the economy, because the investments are not liquid investments. If you have set up a plant to produce maybe a phone or pen or tomato or something, you can't change it overnight to go and produce something else. You are stuck with that.
Interesting conversation, but we need to end now because I hear that we're out of time. Okay. But thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for staying with us. Remember, you can always tune in for more informative, discussions of this nature on Star Times Channel 308, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you for staying with us.